Hi, I'm Paul Fisher. I'm a lead analyst with KuppingerCole, and I'm here at EIC 2022 in Berlin. And I've got with me Mike Kaiser from SailPoint, who spoke yesterday. Well, first of all, Mike, how's the conference been so far for you?
It's been fantastic. It's nice to be back in person. It's a little bit of a shift to Berlin, but it's a nice shift. So I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, cultural shift as well, I would say.
Slightly, yes. But I'm from Austin, Texas, so it feels a similar vibe.
So you're used to the vibe,
Yes.
as it were. Yeah. Well, I mean, I managed to see some of the keynotes yesterday, and I saw the CISO roundtable or the CISO panel. And one of the things that I remember one of them guys saying was that he would wish vendors to stop making everything so complicated, or he would like to see less complexity in solutions, etc. So you're a vendor, or you represent a vendor.
Sure.
How do you respond to that?
Oh, I don't disagree at all. I on the contrary, I agree completely.
Right.
I think that it depends on a few things. Ease of use is definitely supreme. You have to know what the customer needs or what the presenting use case is, right? Once you know that, then you can make things more simple. The way I like to explain or talk about this is similar to getting off a international flight and arriving in a new city. What happens? If you're a fan of public transport like I am, you walk over to the metro map and you look at it, and there's just a ton of information, right? Where you are, where your hotel is, where the city layout is, all of these things. Usually what you do is you figure out, you look at the timetables. These days, you can take out the app for the public transport, and it will tell you, oh, take, U2 at this time and go. That's one level of making things easy to use, right? And so that's helpful because that takes all that complexity away and gets me to where I want to go. But if I'm really interested in being at my hotel very quickly, I don't even take public transport at all, right? I call a rideshare, especially in the States or sites where that's there. That's yet another level of complexity taken on by the vendor, in this case, the driver of the car, because that person knows, oh, there's traffic jams usually at this time of day, or you take the A5 instead of the A3 or whatever else it is. And then all I have to do is sit back and think about what I'm going to do when I get to my hotel. So as vendors, I think that's kind of our job, is to see the complexity in these systems and try and abstract it out so that the end user, the end client doesn't actually have to think about that. The system is intelligent enough and knows enough about what's going on to present contextual information that's helpful and long-term make decisions for the person, just like me sitting in the back of that car going someplace.
Yeah, well, I mean, we also heard, I think, not all presentations, but a lot mentioned automation.
Sure.
And we're all hoping for automation to take away some of the chores of identity management and security. And I think we did talk about automation a lot. But are we any further down that road of achieving a significant step towards automating some aspects of the stuff so we can concentrate on let's say, for example, or what you might call more bread and butter security. So those guys that have access to stuff that's not high value or high level, can we safely automate that? Or is that still?
I think we're going to quickly run out of choice.
Yeah.
So I think it's a technological issue and it's a cultural issue because the technology has to work, but it also has to be transparent in the way it does things so that the culture can change, right? It's one thing to say, oh, we want automation. It's another thing to trust the system, that the system knows enough and has acted historically responsibly in the past to trust the system to take over. So it depends on, I would say we have the technology. The culture is, like always, is going to be the more difficult part, getting people used to it and keeping that transparency and accountability in how those systems work. I think definitely for base cases, we're ready to start automating. And in fact, conversations I've been having over the last 6 months to a year, it's not just enterprises, but it's also, if you think of like governance use cases, for instance, it's the auditors that need to transition as well. And I'm hearing more and more that they are ready to do that, to say, yes, the system is automated, but as long as you have compensating controls, as long as you have a coherent plan, as long as you do what you say you're going to do, then they're okay with automation. And so that's an inflection point. I'm not saying we've arrived, but there is progress being made. And the key is knowing what the point of the automation is. It's really easy to say, oh, we should automate because that's just a great buzzword, right?
And also it's a good sales ploy to say we've got automation, but it has to be genuine and it has to be useful and secure. Something else that comes up a lot, obviously, and it comes up so much it sounds like a cliche, but it isn't. It is cloud and multi-cloud and cloud adoption and everything else. And we've seen the emergence of CIEM platforms, and we talk about the Dream platform here at KuppingerCole. And I think that is actually, for me, that's a significant shift into probably a new era of managing cloud and managing the access and resources and the identities. So, and I know that you're also a fan, or at least a proponent of this. So where do you think we are on that road?
Well, the cloud adoption is in part why I say we have no choice but to automate. The speed and scale with which these cloud resources pop up and then fade away means that if we're not using automated processes, we're never even going to see it. And so I think that it's shifting how we think about access and governance, and it's pushing some of these decision points more and more to the edge, I think, to where what you still need some centralization, you still need governance, you still need policy in some central repository, but then the ideal would be to push out identity context to where the decisions are being made enough so that you can make those decisions at speed and scale.
I'm really glad you said that, because that's part of my talk today, actually, where I'm talking about doing exactly that and how we have to be less reliant on sort of fixed platforms and monolithic solutions that sort of somehow try and keep abreast of everything, but with an ever expanding, how you can't do that. So absolutely, I believe I agree.
It's funny. It's both and, right? It's going to be multiple levels, I think, of systems working together. So things like shared signals, which we were talking about the OpenID workshop yesterday morning here. That I'm a huge fan of that, because that's exactly what that is. It's taking security components and sharing identity context in the moment, so you can revoke sessions, so you can make things much more closer to real time than they would be otherwise.
I was actually late last night. Well, not that late, but late for us. I had a chat with Annie Bailey, who's one of my fellow analysts, and we were talking about some of the stuff that was discussed in the later sessions yesterday, which is more, I guess, more philosophical and more about privacy and the morality of everything that we're doing. And I was more of the view that, well, all I'm interested in is whether the right identities get the right access. And I'm sorry, Annie, if you're listening, and I got you wrong, but she was seemed to be more interested in, well, not more interested, but aware of the social or the societal impact of everything that we're doing. And, we're playing around with people's identity. And a lot of the speakers were, touching on that identity isn't just a thing or a group, it is individuals. So for me, as I said, I'm more black and white.
Right or it's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But how do you sort of see this this moral question about how we deal with this?
Well, I'm always intensely fascinated by the intersection of technology and culture, technology and normal people's lives, right? If you talk about identity and access, people understand the concept, but they're not really interested in thinking about it. Do I have access to Salesforce is not going to be something people think about at breakfast necessarily every morning, right? But if you say, if you share information online, do you want that obtainable by others? If you share your photos online of your holiday in the south of Spain, do you want everyone to know that you were there? Do you want people to be able to identify your face or whatever else? And people instantly have reactions, right? And those, while those seem diametrically opposed, they're actually kind of related, because how we handle identity on the larger scale, I think, informs how we handle identity on some level within enterprises. You're still thinking about, who's responsible for what and these kinds of technologies, but the interplay there is fascinating to me. When I talk to people about privacy and these kinds of notions, like I said, no one says, I don't understand what you're talking about. There's a visceral reaction. In my keynote yesterday, I talked about how I'd written this proof of concept research app in both Android and iOS that gives you the ability to kind of disguise your photos a little bit. And no one says, oh, I don't want that. Everyone is like, well, how do I get that? And I'm like, well, you don't want to use it. It's just research. No. But they intrinsically get the idea, right? These issues are not simple, though. Even with facial recognition, my talk yesterday, it's the temptation is to say this is inherently evil and we should ban all cameras from the planet. And that's not really the answer either, because there's a good and a negative side there.
But I think you're right. The public, I mean, certainly in Europe, there with GDPR, people actually, business said, "Oh, this is a load of bureaucracy, red tape. We're going to cost us a fortune." But the public said, effectively, "Yeah, we like it. We like the fact that now companies can't just play fast and loose with our data and our identities." When Apple introduced the option to stop apps automatically sharing data, everyone's going to, I like that. Of course, it's the first thing I say now is, you can't do that. And it's crazy that we even had it happening before. So I think businesses now realize that this is probably, along with things like ethical standards, is a bit of a selling point rather than it actually could make them money.
This is the way the world works, right?
Even if the idea, cynical way,
even if the idea is this altruistic goal, someone's going to find a way to market it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you are competing to prove that you are more ethical and more responsible with your customers' data or your employees' data or how you handle whatever you have access to, and maybe that's not a bad thing. A race to the top rather than a race to the bottom maybe should be encouraged. I totally agree. It's like nutritional labeling, on iPhone or Android for that matter.
And Apple's, I mean, let's face it, Apple is just a gigantic corporate beast as they are, but they do actually are very clever at making themselves look
totally.
Better.
At CES, they had that billboard that said, what happens on iPhone stays on iPhone.
Yeah, great.
Now, is that true? You can debate that. Is it a great marketing tactic? Oh, for sure. And it makes people go, oh, I hadn't even thought about that being an issue. So, then again, I have a theology degree along with a technology degree. So
that's good. Yes.
It's kind of my wheelhouse, this kind of intersection between, technology and culture, technology and ethics. So.
Okay, let's talk about Mammon then, quickly.
About what, sorry?
Mammon, or the devil.
Wow. Sure. We got time.
Well, just to sort of wrap this up, probably one thing that we maybe don't talk enough about here is actually business and what all this can do for the customers, really, who are not necessarily the buyers, but their employers. And do you think we say enough about the benefit to business of identity management?
I think that we tend to shift towards the danger side. The fire and brimstone, if we're extending this analogy further, and less on the this will make you productive kind of vibe. I think that we could do more talking about business. I think it's inherent. A lot of the people that come to EIC and some of these other conferences, you have different levels, right? Some are concerned with making things work. Some are concerned with making bad things not happen. But then there's a third category of people who are looking to make sure that identity and access is done well, and then they can focus on their core business. To go back to my other analogy, they're sitting in the back of the car, looking to see where they're going and anticipating what they're going to do when they get to the hotel. That's we kind of want to do your job and get out of the way.
Yeah.
In a way, because most clients, most customers' main business is not doing identity, so to speak. It's some other real world business.
Well, that's a great note to end this interview. Mike Kaiser, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for joining us here at EIC 2022 Berlin.